Welcome to SheVentures. I'm Doria, co-founder of CentSai. Listen to women who take risks, build community, and get shit done. Recording from Madison Avenue in New York City. Today's show is brought to you by Audible. Audible is offering our listeners a free audiobook with a 30-day trial membership. Just go to audibletrial.com/SheVentures and browse the unmatched selection of audio programs. Download a title free and start listening. It's that easy. Go to audibletrial.com/SheVentures to get started today. Today I'm speaking with a North Carolina entrepreneur who pivoted from a 20-year teaching career from which she quit one day when she decided she had had enough. A scene that was something along the lines of the old country song, "You Can Take This Job and Shove It." She would make soaps and candles as gifts, but never thought about turning it into a business until, well, she did. In 2014, Southern Elegance Candle Company was born, and she has never looked back. A military spouse, a mother, and a kick-ass business owner, Deshawn Russell, welcome to SheVentures.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here.
It's great to have you on. So I'd love to have our listeners get to know you a bit outside of your business first. Can you talk to me a little bit about growing up and the values that were instilled in you?
Of course. So I grew up kind of in a dual environment. I grew up in Durham, North Carolina. We traveled a lot, but we finally settled in Durham. So I kind of grew up in a fairly rough environment for the most part of the year. And then during the summers, I would go down to my grandmother's house, who lived in the country, like literally quintessential one stoplight kind of town in Roseboro, North Carolina, which is in Sampson County.
When you say rough environment, what do you mean?
Durham has changed a lot now, but traditionally it was a high poverty area, high crime area. I think with anything, it was very racially segregated and very socioeconomically segregated. If you were Black, more than likely you lived in Durham City, which is where we live. And if you were white, you probably lived in the county. A lot of that has changed now, but my high school that I went to Hillside High School. We literally had one white person that attended my high school, and I graduated in 1989. So it's not even like it was that long ago. So things were very segregated along socioeconomic and racial lines when I grew up in Durham.
Got it. Then you had these summers that were much different.
It's interesting. I hadn't planned on talking about this, but it's interesting. It really wasn't that much different. It was just like on a much smaller scale. So my grandmother lived in Roseboro, North Carolina, and she lived in a part of the city called Colortown, which is basically where all of the Black people live. So we lived in another, I went from one segregated area in a big city to a segregated area in a small city, basically. So it was very interesting, the dynamics of that.
And what would you say were the values that were instilled in you, or what influenced you growing up by what you saw?
Oh, I was so lucky because I had my great-grandmother and my grandmother to grow up with. They basically told me that education was going to be my way out of poverty, that I was going to be given opportunities, even as limited as they were, that I was going to be given opportunities that they never had. So like going to college, getting scholarships, traveling, just basic things that I took for granted. They let me know that there were a lot of people that paved the way for me to have those opportunities, and that I really needed to take advantage of every single opportunity that I'm ever given. My great-grandmother was also a Pentecostal holiness minister at a time when women literally were not allowed in the pulpit. And she would start churches under trees and then build her own churches. So I knew that you could pretty much achieve whatever you set your mind to. If she could start a church, then I could go to college, because she wasn't even allowed in the pulpit, and she just never let that stop her. She was just a phenomenal woman and just a great influence. So, but then I also had those traditional, very strict Christian upbringings also. So for a long time, you had to wear the skirts all the way down to your ankles and, pants. And it was just, Very traditional Christian upbringing. I'll just leave it at that.
Okay. And I'm thinking back, I do remember a time, I think we're a similar age, where women, it was just unthought of for women to be doing anything in terms of leading congregations. So the fact that she was able to do that is amazing.
I totally agree. So she is like whenever I get tired, I always think of my great grandmother and say, if
Yeah.
she can start a church under a tree in North Carolina, I can get through today. Like, it's just real simple.
Puts it in perspective for sure. And so, Christian background, did you come from a large or a small family?
I have two sisters. My immediate family was kind of small, but of course, that extended cousins, second cousins, people that say they're your cousin, you're not even really sure if they're your cousin. So I was very lucky that I did grow up around a huge extended family. Like I said, I grew up with my great grandmother. My great grandmother's brothers and sisters were alive until I was in my 20s. And when I say my great grandmother, I grew up with my great grandmother, two actual great grandmothers, and their siblings were alive, and then their children. So when I grew up, I had oh my God, so many cousins and family members and aunts and uncles. So it was huge.
Right.
Yes.
And it sounds like the maternal side was really influential. Why was that so?
I think that's just the way it was back then. Like the women supported the women. The men were off doing men stuff. And quite frankly, my great grandfather, I had my great grandfathers in my life, but they were off doing man stuff,
Okay.
for lack of a better term. So that literally might mean, working in the fields, or because we had fields and we had hogs, and we were, they hunted, so, or they worked on cars. So I grew up in a time where everybody's roles were very defined. So the women helped the women and supported the women. And I think that's why my grandmothers would always tell me that I could be pretty much whatever I wanted to be, because they knew what their limitations was. And I think they could just kind of see things changing and wanted me to take advantage of those opportunities. But that's just how it was. The women supported the women and the men supported the men.
Isn't that the truth, though? I think that, I look at my own daughters today, and I think that we always see the opportunity ahead for our children, and we hope that they will be able to take advantage of the sacrifices of people that came before them.
I totally agree. So I had my child very late in life. I had my son when I was 40. So when I look at him, all I see is the future. And it's so weird because I try to raise him for a time when I have no idea what is going to exist. So when people say, "Oh, are you pushing him to do X, Y, and Z?" And I'm always like, absolutely not, because I don't even know if X, Y, and Z is going to exist in 20 years or
Right.
30 years. And I don't want to limit his future based off of my current lack of vision, because I can't see all of the possibilities that are going to be out there. So I try to raise him to be just very open minded and curious and smart, and always to explore, because there's no telling what's going to be 50 years from now. And I want him to just be prepared for it, for whatever.
That's so true. I think about the fact that 30 years ago, we didn't have the internet, and the world has changed so much even in this time.
I totally agree. So my parents told me to be a teacher because when they were growing up, being a teacher was the epitome of a nice stable job. You could raise a family, you could support your husband. Like, these are literally things my mom told me,
Right.
and I became a teacher.
And you were a math teacher for more than 20 years.
Yes, I was a math teacher for 22 years.
What attracted you to teaching? Was it primarily the parents?
Yeah, my mom told me to be a teacher, marry a soldier, because that's what she did. And it gave her a nice, stable life. So she wanted me to have the same thing: a nice, stable life, a consistent check, and a good husband. Like, those were her goals for me.
Right.
And I'm just like, I asked, I'm like, why you didn't tell me to be a doctor? Or why you tell me to be a teacher? But for her, during that time, that was a great job to have. And it allowed me to support my husband. in her mind, she was giving me the best advice that she possibly could.
And when you say support your husband, you mean because he was in the military?
Well, whatever my husband was, like at that time when she told me to be a husband, be a teacher, she didn't, whatever your husband, if your husband is a doctor and you're a teacher, then that means that you get off work at a certain time and you can be there for the kids and you don't have to work during the summers. And, you just have a job, you get paid a decent salary, and it's not intrusive into the life of your man. It's supporting him.
Understood. And I think at that time, those, as you said, those were key values. And I'm really intrigued by the fact that you went into math because, as you know, even today, women are like 15 to 20% of the STEM workforce. So what drew you to math?
I was in college and I was taking some other, I don't know, rinky-dink little classes, and I was bored out of my mind. And I was just like, okay, I'm not going to get through college if I don't find something a little bit more challenging to at least make me want to show up to class and participate. So I changed my major from something like communications, or I can't even remember what it was, to math. And I majored in math. And I took math classes. My elective classes in college were math classes because I enjoyed it so much. I would go to summer school and take additional math classes that were not necessary for me to take because I just enjoyed those classes so much. And that's how I ended up as a math teacher.
That is awesome. I really am impressed by that. It's funny. I didn't have a great experience with math early on, but when I went back to take math classes as an adult, I realized that it actually is a wonderful subject. And I don't know quite why I had so many hangups about it in junior high. Maybe I wasn't focused, but I love it. I think it's a great subject.
And the second part to that is, I've always been a smart kid. I was, in the accelerated classes all through school. I think the other part to that is I wanted to teach something to minority students, poor students, women, like the underdogs. I wanted to go into a classroom and make them smart. That was my goal every single day when I was a teacher. I would tell the kids, oh, you're going to learn this. And they'd be like, oh, I can't do it. I'm like, if I can do it, you can do it. You might can't do it to the level that I'm doing it, but there's a certain level of accomplishment that you can achieve, and we're going to make sure that you get there. You're going to leave my class smarter than what you came in and more confident than when you came in. And that was my goal every single day as a math teacher.
That must have been very fulfilling.
Working with children and changing the lives of children is phenomenal. That is the best part of being a teacher. Like, I know that I made a difference in people's lives because they came back and told me. They would come back and say, because of you, I had enough confidence to do X, Y, and Z. So that part of it, making a difference, is like phenomenal. It was all the other stuff that I just couldn't take.
Right. The bureaucracy and all the nonsense. And so in the intro, I, mentioned the fact that one day you had had enough and quit your job. And it sounds like you didn't even really have a plan necessarily to quit, but something happened and that was that. And so you went into entrepreneurship. My question is, I think there are a lot of entrepreneurs that are out there that are never sure, right? It's always this question of, when do I leave my main gig and go full steam ahead with my side hustle? Based on how you approach things, what advice would you give them?
So I think this is a two-part question.
Mm-hmm.
I grew up in a time when entrepreneurship was not glorified like it is today. So I think people that are entering in entrepreneurship have a lot more information to go on in order to make a better decision. So what I tell people is, don't quit your day job until your side hustle matches your main check. Or don't quit your day job unless you have a partner that can support you while you're learning the ropes of your business. One of those two things has to happen. I think people have this glorified notion that you're going to just start this company and start rolling in the dough. And it really doesn't work like that. So I was able to quit my job because my husband made enough money that we could get the bills paid and we could still eat. We couldn't do all of the things that we could do when I was working, but we had enough income that we didn't have to worry about how the lights were going to get paid, how we were going to eat, or how, he was going to get gas to get to work. Like we didn't have to worry about those things.
So you're basically saying, don't be irresponsible about it and don't fall for that. And it's so true. There's a very glorified, vision of entrepreneurship right now where I think people, they see some success and they assume that it's instantaneous and they don't see the 10 years that came before it.
I totally agree with that. And so I'm always very honest when I talk to people about how hard it's been to grow the company, and that the only reason I've been able to do it is because I had a partner that worked with me throughout the whole process, and not to just look at my Instagram feed and think that that's how it started out, because it didn't. And I left all of my pictures on my Instagram feed so people could literally scroll back. If you got time, you can scroll back and see how the company started and how it progressed to where it is today. Yeah, nobody thinks that this is where we started. This is not where we started. This is where we are now. And it's taken a lot of work to get
There must be an incredible amount of pride when you scroll through that.
On any given day, I walk into my warehouse, my production facility, and I look around and I'm just amazed at everything, like literally everything. That I have employees, that I make candles, that we're in excess of 300 stores, that I have a company. Like any given day, I walk in and I'm just amazed at everything that has occurred. I take nothing for granted.
What did day 2 look like for you after you quit your job? What was it like? Oh shit, what do I do? Or how did you handle it?
So day 1, my husband told me when I came in, I was like, listen, I just quit my job. And he was like, what are you going to do? And I was like, I think I'm going to just make candles. And he's looking at me like, okay, you have lost, you don't even, what are you talking about? You're just going to make candles. And I was like, no, I think I can turn it into a business. And he was like, you got 1 year to learn how to run a business, because I had no business background. So day 2 looked like me finding business classes to take. Like literally, like I got to learn.
Okay.
I didn't know how to wholesale. I had no idea how that whole process worked. So I had to find a wholesaling class so I could kind of learn how that worked. I had to find a branding class because I had no idea. You hear people talking about building a brand. I had no idea. I kind of rolled my eyes when people said that. But all of a sudden it became, you have to build a brand. You can't just make stuff, because anybody can make stuff. You have to make stuff that people want to buy and build it around the whole story and really pull people in. And how are you going to do that? And that's what a brand is. So I had to learn how to create a well-branded product. So those were the first 2 classes that I started with, just learning. And I just spent every day watching YouTube videos and Googling how to run a small handcrafted business and finding places to sell my candles. Like I was selling, I didn't care. Every church bazaar, every street festival, I did not care if I could buy a table in your space. I was there with my candles so that I could learn like what people like, what scents people like, what scents people didn't like, what price point could I, sell at. And then one day, like literally, I had worked outside of the street festival in February and it was cold. It was like freezing. And I was like, okay, this is not going to work. These days, like this has got to come to an end. So then I started like saying, okay, I cannot do this. And then February, like June, July came and I was still outside in the elements. And I was like, okay, I went from literally freezing to now it's 100 degrees. The candles were melting. I'm outside, like I felt like I was melting. So I was like, okay,
you're melting. Yeah.
I was like, okay, we got to get out. We got to get into some boutiques. Like we got to get into some stores. So I do not have to do this. By then I had learned, what people like, what they didn't like, because I spent a year doing every possible festival. So when I started approaching stores, I had upgraded my packaging. I had worked on my brand story. And I was able to get into those first couple of stores that kind of set me up to getting into other stores.
So backing up a bit about your brand, it's, from what I gather, it's about the American South. And tell our listeners how you come up with the scents and the names.
So it's always interesting. Everything about this brand is an extension of my life. It's an extension of growing up, like literally with my grandmother. So when I talk about going back and, the honeysuckles, that's what we had in the country. We didn't have video games and the internet. You had to go outside and play. So we would literally find honeysuckles and pull the stem out and suck the nectar off of the stem because that's what you did as a kid. We had apple trees and plum trees and pear trees in our yard. We had pecan trees. You cooked meals from scratch. Everything about the brand is a personal experience from my life. And all of our fragrances are fragrances that like literally grow in the ground in the South. Like we're not going to have any type of scents that are not native to a Southern state. So I just built the whole brand around something that I could authentically talk about, or I could authentically smell and say, "Yep, that's a lemon pound cake." Yep, this is apple cobbler or whatever it is.
Right.
So I just built the whole brand about just around something that I could personally vouch for, so that it would be authentic.
Authenticity is, gosh, it's so key, right, in building a brand, because if you can't tell your story, I think people feel it right away. And that's a huge issue. With your candles, how many do you have? And can you give us just some of the names of them?
So we have 12 that are a part of our regular line. So it's like Carolina Pine, because we're the Pine State here in North Carolina. We have apple and bourbon, but it's like apple, maple, bourbon. And the reason I chose that one is because growing up, we had apple trees, and my grandmother would cook us fried apples for breakfast. And she would put like cinnamon and butter and sugar on these apples and fry them up for us for breakfast. So that's like why we got the apple maple bourbon.
And a little bourbon too, or
Not my grandma. She was too religious. But maybe my granddaddy. But so then we have one called Coastal Waters, because we would like literally pile up in the station wagon. Back then, there was no such thing as seatbelts. All of the kids would just pile into a big old station wagon, and we'd drive down to the coast. Kids slept on the floor, and the parents got to bed, and we would spend the whole day down at the beach. So we have Coastal Waters. We have one called Tobacco and Caramel called Bright Leaf, because growing up in Durham, the Dukes had a monopoly on the cigarette trade. And even when I was growing up, they still had the warehouses through downtown Durham, and you can drive through and smell the tobacco curing. So we have a tobacco and caramel, like literally every single scent. I could tell a story. The Charleston is sweet tea. We have a sweet tea candle. We have a jasmine and honeysuckle candle. We have a magnolia candle. I have a magnolia tree in my front yard, like right now. We have Main Street, front porch.
I can't wait. As I told you before the show, I ordered a few and I cannot wait to smell them and just have them burn. And, it sounds like you've really spent a lot of time thinking about the scent and the mood that it creates, which I think is fantastic.
I have a team that I work with here, and we do spend a lot of time making sure that the name that we come up with for the candle and the fragrance really do have a connection, so that it makes sense for people. So if you've ever been to Charleston, you know that there's the last sweet tea plantation still is in operation, is in Charleston. So like it. If you've ever been to New Orleans, other than Mardi Gras, that's what people always think of. But they have these huge magnolia trees all throughout the city. You know it if you've ever been to some of these places. And most of the places that we name a candle after are places that I have also personally been to. So it's like the scent, the name, everything. There's a total connection to make sure that it is as Southern as possible.
One of the other things that I learned about your company is that you place a lot of importance on using local suppliers. And I wanted to ask you, as a business owner, because I hear often people saying, it's hard to use American suppliers because it's more expensive. What do you say to that?
It is. It's true. That part is true. So, I limited myself. I was lucky that I was able to find suppliers for the vast majority of my items. I pay more for a lot of the items. I could probably get them cheaper if I ordered from China. I just choose not to. One of the companies that I work with for my wax and my jars, they pay a living wage to all of their employees. So as a result, they have to charge more. So I pay, you know what I'm saying? So I pay more for some of my supplies so that I could support a company whose ethics I believe in. I think sometimes you have to decide where your line is going to be and then just kind of roll with it. So I decided that if my brand was going to be Southern, that I was going to support other small Southern businesses. And that's what I've done. And I've been lucky that I'm able to do it. There's only one item that I am not able to get, and those are my black tins because we don't have anybody in the South that makes them. That is the only
What are
item,
they? Sorry.
the black tins. So one of my
Oh, got it.
yeah,
Okay.
that is the only item that we buy that has to come from California because that's where the company is that makes them.
California. What? No, I'm kidding.
No,
That's wonderful.
but that's it. Everything else, our fragrances come from Georgia. Our wax and jars come from North Carolina. Some of our containers come from a company down in South Carolina. But the vast majority, our shipping supplies come from South Carolina. So just about everything comes within, yeah, about 100, 200-mile radius from where I operate.
And so as you said, you are living your principles and you've made a decision that that is the most important thing, and also providing other people with working wages. I really applaud you for that. As a result, what are the price range for your candles?
So we have our lowest price item is a $10 wax melt. And our highest priced item is our large tumbler, which is $28, which in the big scheme of like the candle world, $28 really is not an expensive candle. There are plenty of candles that are $40 and $50 that are smaller than mine.
How long does a tumbler burn for?
About 50 hours, but it always depends on 50 to 60 hours, depending on the person. So I like to put it in terms of how long will it last me. So it'll last you about 3 months if you are the average candle burner. Now, if you are a power burner that burn it every day when you get home, you like to burn it and then it burns for hours on end, it's not going to last quite as long. It really depends on the person. This is more information than most people ever ask. And then I'd be like, okay, so if you put it under a vent, then the air from the vent is going to cause the flame to burn hotter. So it's going to, and people are looking at me like their eyes start glazing over, like, just give me some time. Okay, about 3 months.
Right. Fair enough. As far as distribution goes, because this is something I really don't know a lot about, and I would imagine it was something you also had to learn. I know that you're on Etsy, and I believe you're on Amazon. And then you just mentioned, which I didn't know, that you're in 300 stores. How does that journey happen?
I started on Etsy because Etsy had Etsy wholesale back in the day. So I applied to that and I got on Etsy wholesale. And that allowed me to get into like some of my first stores. So I sold on Etsy strictly because of Etsy wholesale. I sold on Amazon. We're off Amazon now, but I sold on Amazon because I felt like everybody said you got to sell on Amazon. Like, you
Right.
need to be on Amazon. And I found Amazon to not be in the best interest of my brand because a lot of stores don't like to sell items that people can't get on Amazon because people will just log on and be like, oh, I'm gonna just get this on Amazon. So we're not on Amazon anymore. The rest of those 300 stores really comes from a lot of hard work, cold calling, which people really don't like, cold emailing, going to trade shows.
It must work. Like I've heard of people saying cold calling, it never works. It must work to some degree.
Okay, so I'm trying to figure out how I can say this so I don't offend anybody, but I just think I'm going to say it and hope that not too many people become offended. So right now, everybody and their mama think that they can make something and sell something and it should be in a store. So stores are inundated with people contacted them saying, hey, sell my widgets, sell my candles, sell my soap, sell my sugar scrubs, sell my whatever it is. So they get inundated with people wanting them to sell stuff. And a lot of times the items that people are contacting them about is not a good fit for their store. So my brand is very Southern. We're mostly in Southern stores. Me contacting a store in Minneapolis, for example, is probably a waste of everybody's time. So stores are inundated with people. So the vast majority of the time, they tell you either kick rocks or they totally ignore your email because they have stuff in their store that's selling and they're not going to take a chance on a new brand. So what happens is after time, you email them, you call them, then you email them, you email them, you email them. Finally, they'll open up your email and then they might go look at your social media and then they go, oh, this is interesting, but we're not ready to take a chance. And then you just keep emailing them, or you might, they might go to your website and then you retarget them with the ad. So that ad, follows them around. And eventually they said, oh, okay, we might give this person a shot. But that may take 6 months to a year before they finally come around to take a chance on your brand.
Wow. And that's a lot of legwork and time. How much time would you say you spend prospecting or trying to get new sales or outlets?
Every day. Every day I spend time every day. At the end of the day, I always ask myself, what have I done today to help get my brand in front of new stores or into new stores? And there has to be something that I have done to move it forward. So every single day.
Is the rejection hard?
It was in the beginning because you feel like it's personal, but after you get no, and then, after a while, people will tell you, hey, you're great, your candles are great, whatever, but we got a brand that we're selling and we're just not going to take a chance on you. So it's not even personal, or it's not the right time. It's not their buying season. Or sometimes they don't really have a reason to say no. They just say no. So after you get that rejection enough, after a while, you kind of go, okay, there could be 1,001 reasons why they are saying no. And none of it is personal. It's not a reflection of the candles. They're just saying no. Sometimes I contact people and they say, we only work with local candle makers. We only work with people that live within, our city. There is nothing I can say to convince them otherwise. And it's not personal. It's just what they chose to do with their business. After a while, you expect to know. You just keep going because eventually somebody is going to say yes, and you have to get to that person.
And that yes must be so exhilarating.
It is. I tell everybody I take nothing for granted, mainly because I didn't know how any of this works. So every time I get a new store that carries my candles, like, I'm still excited. I take nothing for granted. I say that all the time because I am really happy every time anybody says, yes, we'll carry your candles.
So I assume you've bootstrapped your business to date. Is that accurate?
Yes.
And can you give listeners an idea of either revenue or growth since you've started?
I can, and I tell people I am not typical. I am not typical. So I've been in business 3 years. We did about 60,000 my first year, about 100,000 my second year, and we did about I have to look at my taxes, but somebody about 230 to 40, 240,000 last year. So
Congrats.
we are, growing very quickly, but I work very hard. And I don't mind talking about numbers, and I don't collect a check. Well, I've just started collecting a check this year, but the first 2 years I did not collect a check because all of the money had to go back into the business. And every time you scale up, you need more money to scale. That's why people need, investors, because that investment allows you to scale up and buy bigger amounts of supplies. So when you are bootstrapping, it takes a lot to bootstrap because you literally have to take every single dollar, put it back into the company to upgrade your photography, upgrade your website, upgrade your labels, upgrade your packaging, Facebook ads, Google ads. So every time email marketing, then you have to pay people to help you. And then that's a whole other thing where, you have payroll taxes that you didn't realize. And then I like to pay people. I'm trying to get everybody that works for me also up to a living wage. There's so many pieces that you don't realize that are going to cost you a lot of money that, when you are bootstrapping, it is very hard to build the company. It's just incredibly difficult. And I think that part, when you are bootstrapping a product-based business where you are manufacturing the product, let me say that, it is very hard. But the long-term implication is like if you do it right, you're literally building a whole company. and you control the whole supply chain. So you don't have someone outside. If somebody else is making your product and they go out of business, then your whole company could collapse. Where I don't have that issue. Like, we make everything in house. So as the company grows, I control everything about the company. It's easier to pay somebody else to do it, but in the long term, I have more control over everything that happens here.
That's brilliant.
I think people just have to make a decision about, like, how do they want to move forward. But if you are a micro manufacturer in the United States and you want to control the product from the raw goods to the finished product out of your door, it is going to take you, it's going to take a lot of money, and it's going to take a lot of time to do that if you want to 100% own your own company.
Are you at a point now where you wouldn't consider outside capital?
So I fell into that trap in the beginning of wanting investors and wanting to go on Shark Tank and, wanting all of these people to give me money. And I'm glad I never got it, because I am at the point now where I don't want investors. That may change in the future, but at this moment right now, I see the importance of owning and having total control of your company without outside people telling you how they think that you should maneuver or what they think that you should do, or you need to make more money because they need more money.
Right.
For me, I just feel like I am able to grow it and learn at a pace that's appropriate for me, my community, my employees, and my sanity. That just gives me the freedom to do what I think is best.
That's the ultimate goal of entrepreneurship, right? You're really able to do, and it's obviously come at a great price, but you are now in a position to do what you want when you want and kind of adjust as needed.
I think so.
Yeah, I mean, like, so for example, if your work-life balance is a little bit out of whack, you might be able to scale back, or, if you have a big show coming up, you can focus on that. There's a lot to be said for that. Whereas, to your point, when you take on investors, they may not necessarily have your company's best interest at heart, number one. And number two, you end up working for someone again, which is the whole reason that you most people became an entrepreneur to begin with.
I totally agree. And I've worked with some companies that have been on Shark Tank. I know people that have been on Shark Tank and got investments. And they pretty much have said, if you can do it, figure out a way to do it on your own. The exposure that you get from a show like Shark Tank is fabulous, and it'll propel you there quicker. But you just have to decide, like, what is most important, finishing the race fast or just finishing the race. And if you're okay with just finishing the race and owning 100% of your company, just let it take a little bit longer and still be in control at the end. But I think, like I said, I think the internet and Instagram and Facebook make people want to have everything now, and they make short-term decisions without realizing the long-term ramifications.
I think that's fantastic advice. Have you found any challenges unique to being a woman in business or a woman of color?
I don't think that I could ever separate being a woman and a woman of color. I'm always a Black woman when I show up into a space. So, and that is always challenging. Nobody ever takes me serious when I tell them I have a candle company. I have stopped trying to convince people of the value of it because it's a waste of time.
And you think that's because you're a woman of color?
I think so. I think it's being in micro manufacturing. When I show up, I am not the person that they expect to see in charge of something like this. And because of that, I am treated, I'll tell you a story. So my banker is a woman. She's fabulous. She came to me one day and she was like, we want to extend you a line of credit. I was like, well, I don't even know what a line of credit is. And so she explained it to me, and I was like, why are you extending me a line of credit? And she was like, because you're a business and you're making, X number of dollars, and this is what we do. I was like, okay. So I got a line of credit. So I went in to talk to her. I said, listen, we are rapidly growing, and outgrow our current space well before my lease is up. So I want to talk to you about building. I need to know all of the numbers that I'm going to need to build my own manufacturing facility. I need to know, I gave her all of the specs. It was another guy in there from another bank that happened to be visiting her. And he started telling me all of the reasons why I did not need to build my own factory for my company. He just started listing all of the things that he didn't think that I could handle, from managing the contracting of the building to the financial aspects to the responsibility, the tax responsibility that came along with owning a space versus renting it. And both me and her were kind of looking at him like, so after he left and went through his whole spiel, she was like, don't even worry about that. I'll get with you later. But his assumption was, that I wasn't capable or the company wasn't big enough, or I just wasn't who he expected to come in and be like, listen, in a couple of years, I'm going to probably need, $500,000 to build a factory. I just wasn't that person for him that he expected to need that.
Well, you know what? Screw him. And sorry, that was inappropriate, but it's okay.
But it's what I deal with on any given day. I remember when I would do festivals, people would walk up and be like, so where'd you get these from? Well, actually, it happened to me last weekend. Someone came up and was like, so they couldn't figure out what to ask. So they finally just said, so where do you get these? And I was like, my factory, where my employees make them. And then they kind of looked at me like, what? I was like, I have a 4,000 square foot production facility where my employees make them. Oh, okay.
So what I hear is that you're dealing with racism every day.
I don't know if it's racism or sexism.
Right. But it's one or the other.
One or the other.
What do? Is it knowing that you're successful in your endeavor and just you brush it off, or do you deal with those comments the moment that they happen? How do you handle that?
Because I have dealt with it from the very beginning, I don't feel like I have anything to prove. I think that when you go to my locator map on the website and you pull it up, it speaks for itself. I don't try to explain who I am anymore when I walk into a room. So either you are going to treat me fairly or not. And if the answer is or not, then I really don't feel like convincing you that I'm worthy. Like, I just don't do that. I just won $10,000 in a pitch contest.
You did?
Oh, yeah. I won. It was Bunker Labs, and I was up against some very reputable companies that were doing some really phenomenal things. First off, nobody thought that I would win. I'm 100% positive nobody thought that I would win. And when I won, after I did my presentation, then it was like, oh, okay, she's serious. This is a real deal. This is not some little lady with two pots in her kitchen. This is a real company. You know what I'm saying? So after I did the pitch, it was like, oh. But people came up to me later and it was like, when we saw your name and we saw what you were doing, there was no way that we thought that you would walk away with the $10,000. But after you did your pitch and told your story and showed us exactly what you've been able to accomplish in the last 3 years, there was no way that we were not going to vote for you.
Ah, I love that. What are you going to use the 10K for?
Oh, Lord, I needed the money. I think every small business needs the money, but Lord knows I needed the money. I prayed like, Lord, please let me just win this money. Boxes. So my boxes are extra nice and they're extra expensive.
They're beautiful.
Yes. And I was running low and they cost, I have to get them $5,000 at a time. They come in on a huge pallet, 5,000 of them at a time. And the boxes cost me $1.25 a piece.
Wow. Okay.
And again, I work with a local company. I could get them from China much cheaper, probably for a quarter of the price. Right. But I work with a company that is literally located down the street in another city, like a couple of cities over. So I pay more.
I will say to our listeners that your boxes are incredible. In fact, they kind of channel a little bit of Joe Malone. Mm-hmm. It had that real kind of classy, luxurious vibe to it.
Yes, and I pay dearly for that. So we were running low, and I was like, Lord, where am I going to get like $6,000 right now during like one of the slowest parts of the year. I can always go take a loan because I got good credit. But I was like, if I could just win this money, this would like take this elephant off of my back. So I went in like extra prepared. I'm not even gonna lie. I watched pitch videos on YouTube. I Googled how to pitch because I had never pitched before. I bought a template that was designed exclusively for pitching that I think Uber and somebody else used. Like I bought the exact same template and I followed what they did and I included the information that they said was pertinent. I prepared for this pitch competition for at least a month in advance because I was like, I need this money. I need this money. If you beat me in this competition, it is because you have cured cancer. Like that was my attitude when I went in. So I was like, I need this money. So I was like over prepared and it showed when I did the pitch.
Good for you.
So I'm going to buy boxes and then it'll give me a little bit left over so that the next time when I buy fragrance oils, instead of buying my current size, I can go up to the next size and get it, in bulk.
Makes a lot of sense. So with all of this in mind, and you have so much ingenuity and you are so resourceful in using the things around you, starting from the ideas for your fragrances of the candles to figuring out what you need to do a great pitch. And it's something that I really admire about your story. What advice or takeaway would you give to any aspiring entrepreneur?
That you are 100% in control of your company and your life. When you take 100% ownership of something, I think it gives you a little bit motivation to get it done. So every single day, I don't care what goes wrong in this building, I say that it is my fault. Even when I have provided the training and my employees do something like totally different than my training, I still say that's my fault because then that means I should have provided more training or I should have been on the floor more watching what was happening. Whatever happens, like when you take 100% ownership for it, I think that is the part that will catapult any company past everybody else. When I say it is my job to find new stores, every day I take time to find new stores. When it gets to the point where I don't have the time to do it, that means I need to hire somebody. But at no point do I absolve myself of any of the responsibility of growing the company. It is mine. It is 100% my responsibility to make sure that my employees get paid so that they can eat. It is mine. It is 100% my responsibility to make sure that the candles that go out the door meet the exacting standards that we have every single time. It is my responsibility to make sure that they go out in a timely manner and that our retail partners are happy when they get the candles. They exceed their expectations. That is my responsibility, 100% all day, every day.
It sounds like you have everything under control, and it's a huge job. I can't even imagine. And there must be things also that pop up all of a sudden that you just have to kind of deal with and, either change or adjust course. But you seem to be doing it so well.
Yeah, but if you take responsibility for it, like when things pop up, I just say, hey guys, we're going to figure it out. Like we're just going to figure it out as we go. And we will figure it out. We might not come up with the right answer the first time, but as we move through this, I'm 100% confident that we will figure out a solution. But it goes back to taking ownership. And I don't expect myself to be perfect. Like there are plenty of times I just tell them, I don't know. I don't know. Like we'll figure it out eventually, but I just don't know the answer right now. But we'll get there.
I love the fact that you're willing to say, I don't know, because I find that there are so many people who will not say that. And it's so okay not to know as long as you're willing to figure it out. What does success look like for you? I mean, what's on the horizon?
You want to know my real answer or my politically correct answer?
I want your real answer.
A convertible Jag. I tell everybody, I want a convertible Jag. I have wanted a convertible Jag since I was in high school. It's about an $80,000 car. So when I get to the point where I feel like I can actually afford to buy an $80,000 car, which I probably will never buy it brand new. I will get one used because regardless, I'm still kind of practical. But if anybody ever sees me in a convertible Jag, they know that I have made it. That is the pinnacle.
Do you have a color preference?
black. Don't have any
Nice.
shiny rims. It's gonna be extra, but that's like the physical manifestation of it. But just generally speaking, I wanted a job where I spent 22 years of my life working for other people, doing what other people expected me to do, waiting to be chosen to be a principal or, an assistant principal or whatever it was that I was working towards. I spent 22 years waiting for somebody else to choose me. And now I am 100% in control of what happens. So for me, what it looks like is exactly what it looks like right now. I am in control of this. This company will succeed or fail on the back of my work ethic and my ability to learn and pivot. That's what it looks like.
And you're there. You're doing it.
Mm-hmm.
Last question. If a big or any player, if any player came to you with a heck of a lot of money and said, you know what, I want to buy out your business for X million dollars, the millions I don't want to define, would you sell or would you consider it?
Probably.
Okay.
I sure would. I think everybody has a number. I honestly believe that everybody has a number. And there's nothing wrong with having that number because then there are other things that I could go off and do. If I were to get in a significant amount of money, I could start another company. I could train other women or Black women or whoever, probably just women in general, because I'm finding that my issues are a female issue. I could train other women how to start their own, micro manufacturing company. I could be a coach to them. Like, there are different ways to impact the community. This is just one avenue. So if I had money, I would just choose a different avenue.
Love it. How can our listeners find you?
So they can just always Google Southern Elegance Candle Company. They can find us on Instagram at Southern Elegance Candle Company. They can find us on Facebook. They can find us on Pinterest. They can find us on YouTube. We are everywhere. It's 2019. I'm trying to do it all.
I love it. This has been such an inspiring episode. Thank you so much, Deshawn.
Thank you so much for having me.
You've been listening to SheVentures. Like what you heard? You can find us wherever you get your podcasts. Be sure to subscribe and sign up for our newsletter so you never miss a show.